This week we're studying Parashat Lech Lecha, and I'd like to thank tonight's sponsors, my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Max and Siggy Laredo, who are sponsoring tonight's class in honor of my bar mitzvah parasha. I don't even know how many years ago it was. It was a long time ago. I don't want to date myself. Was it 18 years? Yeah, should be. 18 years ago, exactly, yeah. So I guess now you all know how old I am. Lech Lecha was my bar mitzvah parasha, so they are dedicating tonight's class in honor of all of the participants of the class, in honor of this week's Torah portion. Thank you very much, Mom and Dad. Okay, now we're going to start with this week's Torah portion. So I want to give a little bit of an introduction to this week's Torah portion. Again, the first book of the book of Genesis, especially the first three Torah portions, or at least the first 2-3 Torah portions, fly through like 2,000 years of history. Just the first three Torah portions, from the creation until Abraham, and then further into Abraham's life, is over 2,000 years. So there's a lot going on. Not too much of it is too important, believe it or not. That's why the Torah only singles out specific episodes and lessons and stories. However, it's worthy to note that there is a lot going on. So, as an introduction, after much chaos and destruction, finally in the year 1948, not based on our calendar, but based on from when Adam was born. It's an easy date to remember, right? The establishment of the state of Israel in our years. But according to the Jewish calendar, 1948 was the year that a very special man was born. And this man was the first to discover God as the one and only creator. He was the first to believe to believe in God, in one creator. He also founded monotheism, the idea of a one and only God. And he was the father of the main three religions of our planet, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We obviously know who I'm talking about, and it's Abraham. Abraham was this fantastic individual. And already from a young age, now the commentaries give different opinions of how young he was, but as young as either 3 years old or 5 or 13, Abraham was already questioning his surroundings, his upbringing, the philosophies that he was raised with. And his questions all left him open-ended, but he did conclude one thing, that there is no way that there isn't more to the world than just idols. And he was searching and searching and searching. Finally, at the age of 70, so that's over 60 years of searching, God finally reveals himself to Abraham. It's a long time. Can you imagine? You're like living in this question for your entire life, almost. Finally, at the age of 70, God appears to Abraham, and he gives him a prophecy. And he confirms all of his doubts, his lifelong doubts. That's it. He's assuring him that indeed there is more than the world than idols. There is a one God creator. So I want to, I guess, just share those verses with you. I think I pulled them up. Did I? Where is it? No, I didn't pull them up. Okay, if you want to find that, you can find that in chapter 15, verses 1 through 7. So Genesis chapters 15, 1 through 7, and that is in this week's Torah portion, and that's the famously known covenant between the parts. That's the Brit Ben Abetarim. That was when Abraham was 70 years old. 5 years later, God appears to Abraham again. And then he tells him the famous Lech Lecha. Go for yourself. Leave your country, your birthplace, your parents' home. This I did pull up. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Vayomer Hashem el Avram. God tells Abraham, Lech lecha mi'artzecha mulatecha mibet avicha. Go for yourself, meaning leave. We're going to speak about this. Leave. Leave your land, leave your birthplace, and leave the house of your father. Where? Ela aretz asher areka, to the land that I will show you. So just in and of itself, it's important to know that Abraham didn't even know where he was going. He was just following the direction step by step, day by day. He didn't even have the destination clear. All he knew was that God was his compass, God was his GPS, and he was going full-heartedly. So by Abraham obeying this commandment, God promises him 3 amazing blessings: children, something that he didn't have, wealth, and fame. You can find that in Rashi in this week's Torah portion, chapter 12, verse 2. Now, very soon after arriving to the promised land, there was a famine, and Abraham was forced to search for food in the land of Egypt. So he gets there and he realizes that everything is like upside down. I was promised to come here for wealth, for children, for fame. It's not happening. So Abraham and his group of travelers go down to Egypt, and then they come back up. They come back to Israel after they got food. After 10 years of living in this new land, after he left his homeland, Abraham now is 85 years old. Sarah, his wife, 10 years younger, 75. She comes over to him and says, I think I'm too old to have children. I don't think I'll be able to conceive. I know that God made a promise for you. So come and take my maidservant Hagar and have a child with her. Take a look at the verses. This is chapter 17, verse 15. Vayomer Elokim el Avraham. And God tells Abraham, Sarai ishtecha, your wife Sarai, her name should be changed to Sarah. Ki Sarah Shema, that's her real name. And then he says, Ubirachti ota v'gam natati mimena lecha ben. I blessed you. Through her, you are going to have a son. Ubirachtia v'ayta legoim, and I'm going to bless her, and there's going to be many nations. Malchei ami mimena, you kings of nations will come from her. So Abraham is now being promised to by God. His name was changed. Before that, her name was changed, and God reassures Abraham that he indeed will have a child. However, she's again very, very questioning, and she says, come to my maidservant Hagar and have a child with her. So finally, a year later, when Abraham's 86, Hagar gives birth to famous Yishmael, or the infamous Yishmael. And then, if we fast forward time, when Abraham is 99, there's the name changes of him and his wife. And then they give birth to Isaac when he is 100 years old and Sarah is 90 years old. And happily ever after, right? Almost. After decades of waiting to have a child with Sarah, finally has it. Reb Leib this week, he focuses on that whole back and forth when Sarah Imenu tells her husband to have a child with her maidservant, with Hagar. So first of all, Hagar, the Midrash tells us, was the daughter of Paro. And how did she wind up with Abraham and Sarah? Well, when they came down and they came for food in Egypt, Paro realized, we're not going to get into that whole episode because that was an episode in and of itself. Sarah was kidnapped. Paro wanted to marry her, and then everyone got sick. But Paro realized that these people are very special people, very holy people. And he took his own daughter, Hagar, and said, I prefer that she is a slave, a maidservant in this individual's household, rather than being a princess here in my palace. And that's where Hagar comes from. So approximately 10 years after she was the maidservant of Sarah, or Sarai back then, she's now taken as a wife for Avraham Avinu. Now, Reb Leib then tells us, let's look at the promise that is being constantly made to Abraham. The promise that's all the time being made is that you will have a son. He will inherit you. He will be your successor. You're going to have many nations and much descendants from this individual. So while God is right before, 1 year before Isaac is born, I mean, Abraham and Sarah have like practically given up at this point. 99, 89 years old, like, come on. God reassures him that indeed he's going to have a son. So you're thinking redundant, you're thinking broken record, God forbid. But God again reassures him, reaffirms that he is going to have a son with Sarah. While God is doing this exactly 1 year before Isaac is born, Abraham interrupts God. And this is what Reb Leib is focusing on. Take a look at your screen. So, name change. He promises, here, chapter 17, verse 16, he promises that from Sarai Menu he's going to have a child. Avraham falls on his face and he starts laughing. Chapter 17, verse 17. He says in his heart, I'm 100 years old. Am I going to actually have a son now? And my wife, she's 90 years old. How is she ever going to have a son? How could she get pregnant at this age? So look, I skipped a verse on purpose because verse 18, Abraham interrupts. But let's just finish off. God tells Abraham, don't worry, your wife Sarah will have a baby boy. You're going to call him Yitzchak, and through him we're going to forge that everlasting covenant. In between, verse 18, look, between 17 and 19, Abraham interrupts and says, Lu Yishmael yechel lefanecha. If only Yishmael will live before you. So Reb Leib says, what's going on? God's promising Abraham all these dreams and promises are going to come true. I mean, it's been the same story for some time now. I get it. 25 years he's been hearing this story. Okay. Nevertheless, God was speaking to him through prophecy. And Abraham interrupts and says, please allow Yishmael to live before you. Reb Leib wants to know, how does Abraham have the audacity to interrupt God? How rude. Furthermore, what's Abraham even mean with his comment? Can Ishmael live before you? What's going on? So Reb Leib, in his ultimate and creative way, listen to this, this is fascinating. He says he's going to explain the concept based on a well-known concept that we see in the book of Exodus and Parashat Mishpatim. There is a concept of an Eved Ivri, a Jewish slave. We've spoken about this multiple times over the years. A Jewish slave is typically someone who's caused damage to somebody or stole something from somebody, and they're not able to pay them back, so they have to pay them back by being a slave for them. So let's say a person, whatever the thing, stole $1 million from somebody. Let's just argument's sake. $1 million from somebody, and every year he would work his way a little over $100,000 so that within 7 years, he would pay back the entire debt that's owed to him. This Jewish slave is allowed or was allowed to marry what's called a shifcha kinaanit, a Gentile maid servant. And he would live, not really marry, but he would live with her and have children with her. Time passes, 7 years come up, and the slave does not want to be set free. He prefers to stay working as a slave for his master, claiming, take a look at your screen, Exodus chapter 21, verse 5, V'imamor yomar, and if the slave says, Ahavti et Adoni, I love my master, et ishti, my wife, et banai, my children, lo etzeh hofshi, I don't want to leave. Doesn't want to leave. He likes where he is. He's comfortable. What happens then? He is given the opportunity to stay up until the Yovel year, the Jubilee year. He wants to stay with this new family that he built. Fine. What does Reb Leib say? Reb Leib says from this case of the Jewish slave, we learn something very important about human behavior and human psychology. That the feelings that one has for their offspring is extremely strong. Even if, according to the halacha, according to Jewish law, they're not even his children. Because the slave's wife does not belong to him. Those children do not belong to that Jewish slave. They belong to his master. They're his master's property. Yet he still has feelings for them. What does the Torah do? The Torah acknowledges this and says, okay, fine. You don't want to leave at the end of 7 years? You have up until the Jubilee year. It could be up to 49 years. But at that point, you have to leave this family behind and move on with your life. Now, the reason why the Torah does this at a certain time, forces the man out, is because he's got to move on. And since time has passed, it's much easier to leave because the separation won't be as hard because the children aren't going to be so small and won't be as difficult to leave as if when they were younger. With this concept, Reb Leib says, the concept of the Eved Ivri, the Jewish slave, we can understand a profound interpretation that Nachmanides, the Ramban, gives on Avraham's interruption. Avraham's interruption, when God is promising him, Sarah will have a kid, he's going to be the one. God, please allow Yishmael to survive, to live. You know what the Ramban says? Nachmanides tells us, Abraham is asking God, can all of the blessings that you have promised to Sarah's son take effect on Yishmael? Why would he ever want that? Abraham understood, he thought, that he'll only have one descendant that will inherit him. And since God promised, if you go to chapter 15, verse 4, only through him shall come forth, and he shall inherit you, Abraham thought it was in the singular, explains the Ramban. One child only. Now that he has Yishmael, and Yishmael is now 13 years old, he wants Yishmael to be the one to inherit him and to continue his life mission. But God says, no, don't worry. Your son from Sarah will be the rightful successor. But the Ramban says, you know what Abraham was scared about? That Yishmael would die, since there'd be no more need for him. He was scared that he was now going to lose his son. It seems, Reb Leib says, that Abraham had, at that moment, the Jewish slave syndrome. What's the Jewish slave syndrome? He finds himself, as if to say, at the end of his 6 years of servitude. And Yishmael, his son, from a maidservant, was now to be separated from him. His mission was fulfilled, no longer necessary. The relationship between the father and son was about to end, says Reb Leib. So what was his natural instinct, his natural fatherly love and instinct? That Abraham was refusing for this plan to take place. He was scared of losing his son because he thought that he was going to die, There's no need for Yishmael now because Yitzchak's coming. So that's why Abraham, explains Reb Leib, interrupts God and says, can Yishmael live before you? Lu Yishmael yichya lefanecha, please Hashem, let him live. Similar to like when the Jewish slave says, I love my master, my wife, my children. So basically, in other words, Reb Leib is explaining this Nachmanides to say, Abraham was worried that his son of the maidservant was going to be replaced by his son of his wife. Or he was worried that Yishmael would be replaced by Yitzchak, causing Yishmael to die. And once Abraham realized this, his fatherly natural love and connection to his son didn't want this to happen. Explains Reb Leib, this is why Abraham interrupted God, and this is what he meant. He meant, just let Ishmael take the place as my main son and successor. I don't need another kid. This will be the one. You know what Hashem answered Avraham? Avraham, I'll reassure you that Ishmael will not die. Take a look at your screen. This is, I believe, verse 20. Chapter 17, verse 20. Ulishmael shematicha, God says, I've heard you regarding Ishmael. Hini berachti oto, vifreti oto, virbeti oto bimod meod. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful, and I will multiply him exceedingly. Shenem asar nesiim yolidin tativ legoy echad. He will have 12 princes, and I'll make him into a great nation. So Abraham, again, let's just review this. Abraham was scared that Isaac was going to replace Ishmael, and Ishmael was going to pass away. Abraham's fatherly love for him didn't want that to happen. So he interrupts God and says, please allow Ishmael to live. And God tells Abraham, no problem. Don't worry. I'm not taking Ishmael away from you. However, you should know that Isaac is your main offspring, and he's going to be the successor, and he is going to be the son of Sarah and not of Hagar. So that's the first piece. We're going to tie this together. Now, Reb Leib moves to another nuance. He says, now that we understand Abraham's intention of his interruption of God, we can now look at Rashi for the interpretation of this verse. Rashi says that Abraham was praying to God, requesting for Ishmael. Lu yichya lefanecha, please please allow Ishmael to live in front of you. Rashi says that he should live with your fear, the fear of God. That's what Rashi writes. Basically, he's telling Hashem, give the fear of the Lord upon my son Ishmael. Nachmanides challenges this, Rashi, and he says it cannot be what it means, because God answered Abraham in the affirmative that yes, Ishmael, whatever you just asked for, yes to Ishmael. But do we see that Ishmael, Ramban says, do we see that Ishmael lived a life, a God-fearing life? Absolutely not. At least the vast majority of his life not. Even if you want to say he did teshuvah and he repented at the last moments of his life, and that's why his head was buried with Yaakov in Merat HaMachpelah, fine. But in general, when God said yes to whatever Abraham requested, well, it can't be fear of God because Ishmael did not live a God-fearing life. So Nachmanides says, I'm sorry, Rashi, I can't explain like you. He disagrees and he says, I'll give you another interpretation. In front of you means in front of you, Hashem, which is basically eternal and forever. Please, Abraham was asking, please, Hashem, allow Ishmael and his descendants to never perish. So this is the simple way to understand the dispute between Rashi and the Ramban, Rashi and Nachmanides. Reb Leib goes on to say, I want to propose a different way of understanding this dispute between Rashi and the Ramban. He says, we can definitely say that Nachmanides was bothered with how Abraham could possibly ask or for God to promise something that's completely out of God's hands. Fear of Hashem. The Talmud says, I'll say it in Hebrew and then I'll translate it. Hakol bidei shamayim chutz mirat shamayim. Talmud Masechet Brachot, page 33b, says, everything is in the hands of heaven. Everything is decided by God except for one thing and one thing only, and that is the fear of God. The fear of God is our choice. It's our decision. Yes, of course, based on how we act on that, there's so many different repercussions and consequences and results. But that fear of Hashem that we have, that's ours. Hashem doesn't have any, so to say, influence on that. He does not decide that for us. It's our choice. So the Ramban is bothered. How could possibly Abraham request from God something that's out of God's hands? It's in Yishmael's hands. Doesn't make sense. Therefore, he came with another interpretation. He just asked him to make sure that Yishmael and his descendants would never perish. But Rashi understands a little different. He does understand, like the Nachmanides, that Abraham was scared to lose Yishmael, but not for the same reason Nachmanides used. Not for the reason of, maybe because, because as we explained, the fatherly love that Abraham had for Yishmael, that every father has for their child. Rather, it was for a different reason. Abraham was worried that Yishmael did not have enough fear of Hashem. He did not have enough yirat shamayim. So what did Abraham do? This is the punchline. He prayed for God to help Yishmael to add to his fear of God. Because when I was learning with Rabbi Yisrael Meir Safra, the son-in-law of Reb Leib, he said, "This is a massive chidush. This is Reb Leib's. This is trademarked by Reb Leib. Listen to this. Even though it's completely up to the individual, even though a person's fear of Hashem is completely up to them, it still doesn't mean you can't pray to God for assistance with it. And therefore, what did Abraham do? He prayed to Hashem, Hashem, okay, so this is not going to be my main kid, not my main offspring. But Hashem, please, please, please infuse him with the fear of the Lord so that him and his descendants will go on the right path. So that's Rashi. Rashi was, please Hashem, add fear in him, and that's why he was scared to lose him, because maybe he didn't have enough fear. The Ramban had a different interpretation. He said, no, he was scared to lose him because he was thought that he was going to be replaced by Yitzchak because of that natural fatherly instinct. This explanation of Rashi, Reb Leib says, fits well with God's answer. God said, yes, I will grant him with fear of the Lord. As we see today, as we've always seen, the descendants of Yishmael, the Arabs, fear God tremendously. They do. It's a religion of fear in their own and mistaken way, but there is a lot of fear of God. And this explains, says Reb Leib, why they pray 5 times a day all year long. If you look at us Jews, we only pray 5 times a day on Yom Kippur. 5 times a day, every single day, do the descendants of Yishmael pray. Reb Leib says, you know why? Because God promised Abraham through his prayer. Abraham prayed for it, and God promised it would be so. And that's why they have this aspect of fear and commitment to God, again, in their own and mistaken way. But it's still a tremendous amount of fear and commitment. So the takeaway lessons from Reb Leib this evening are as follows. 2 different concepts. The first concept is that we cannot take lightly this natural instinct that God planted in us as parents and as human beings. The instinctive love that we have for our offspring is not something that we could take lightly. And what's that supposed to motivate us to do? It's supposed to motivate us to use this instinct to raise, educate, and prepare our children for their future, to be the best Jewish adults possible. Because you can tell your wife, Or you could tell your husband that you love them, that you love them, that you love them, that you love them, that you love them. But if you don't do anything good for them, you really love yourself. As much as you love your children, prepare them for the future. Put them on the right track. And this leads us to the second part of the second lesson of tonight's class. And that is that the power of prayer that a parent has for their children is remarkable, probably stronger than anything and anyone, to the point where praying for something which has very little to do with you. God even has very little influence on it. It's the child himself, the fear of God. It's the child's choice. It is still something that we can and have to pray for, and hopefully God will answer in the affirmative the same way he answered for Abraham. So these are the two lessons. Number one, all of us parents, we know it, but know that this instinct is based in Torah, this instinct of fatherly love, of parent love. So father, just because we're speaking about Abraham, but it's obviously father and mother. The natural instinct that a parent has to love and do and give for their children is something that God created us with. Even Abraham, arguably the greatest man that ever walked the face of this earth, he had this natural instinct towards his son Yishmael, who was a wicked person, or going to be wicked at least. And not even his main son, it was from his maidservant. But still, it was his child, just like the Eved Ivri, the Jewish slave. So let's use that love we have for our children. This ties it all together. Let's use the love we have for our children to pray for their healthy development and success.